Welcome to the wisdom of the apple tree. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the apple tree, but I'm just going to share a few details with you to help you feel into the energy of this magnificent species so that you can understand more about its provenance and how it shows up through mythology and different ways that you might want to work with it. So you can choose to listen to this after your meditation, so that you're meeting the tree with fresh ears and eyes for the journey, or you can listen to it beforehand, totally up to you. This meditation journey was recorded in the walled garden at Traquair House, which is in Innerleithen in the Scottish borders, and it's the oldest inhabited house in Scotland, and the garden is filled with really old apple trees. And on this particular day I was in the garden and one of the trees just seemed to stand out and was speaking to me, so I thought, okay, I'm going to sit with you for a while. And I sat at the trunk of the tree and meditated with the tree for a while, and then I started the recording just while I was at the trunk of that tree. So this journey is about connecting with the domestic apple tree. The name Malus domestica is the Latin name, and it's actually the same plant family as lovely rose, the Rosaceae family, and that includes so many other magical plants and trees from the Celtic tree alphabet, the Ogham. So trees like the rowan, the hawthorn, blackthorn, as well as other fruit trees including the cherry, the pear and the plum. So you may not believe it, but actually what we know as our domestic apple tree is absolutely not native to the UK at all. It's often confused with the crab apple, which is similar, and that is native to the UK, and it's actually got much smaller fruits, the crab apples. And what often happens is the two of them hybridize. So you'll come up with trees which are a mixture of the characteristics of both of them. But this is actually the oldest domesticated tree in Europe, and the domesticated apple tree actually has its origins in Central Asia, where you can still find its wild ancestor today. And apples have been grown for thousands of years throughout Asia and Europe, and they were brought to North America when it was colonized by the Europeans. So I just feel like it's an ancient fruit that really helps us connect with our ancestors. And today, as you know, it's grown worldwide, and it's really common. It's a beautiful fruit, very simple, and there's over 7,500 different varieties of apple currently in the world. And actually, I have to mention Somerset, because Somerset in the UK is a county which is known as cider country, and about 156 of those varieties of apples are actually stem from Somerset County, and it's famous in Britain for its apples. And also just mentioning here Glastonbury, the ancient name for Glastonbury, which is a spiritual site in the UK, very famous, was Avalon, which means the Isle of Apples in the ancient British language. So that is found in Somerset too, and I'll be talking a bit more about Avalon later on when I get into the myth and mythology of the apple tree. So I'm sure you know how to recognise an apple tree, but I'm just going to recap. So it's a small, medium-sized tree. We're not looking for a huge tree. They grow up to about 10 metres high, and the leaves are wonderful dark green. I've got one here actually. So they're a typical leaf shape, lovely oval shape with a serrated edge. And if you look underneath, they can be quite furry, sort of woolly, very soft underneath and leathery on top. And they have these beautiful blossoms, which each flower has 5 petals. They're white to pale pink, and they grow in clusters. And we know them. We know, in Britain when it's apple blossom season, because there's just these beautiful displays throughout May and June. And we all know about what an apple looks like. They can be bright green, or they can be really red, deep red. And the really lovely special thing about an apple is if you cut it in crossways, horizontal ways, it reveals a 5-pointed star in the core with 5 brown seeds. And this, when I talk about mythology later, this also is a very magical thing to find inside an apple, and I think this is what leads to the fairy magic that it is so revered for. So it's harder to identify trees in winter, as you know, when they've got no fruit, no leaves. But actually, for an apple tree, you'll recognise it because, as I said, it's quite a small tree, and the bark is typically grey in colour, and it often will have bumps and scales or ridges on the tree trunk. And actually, in the meditation, I talk about imagining a tree which is really gnarly. So, as I said, the tree that I was with was a very old tree, so these apple branches were just bending and twisting, and I could see how they were really weathered and greying and kind of peeling in places. And so we find apple trees in many places. Obviously, it was once a land of many apple orchards, but what these apples are cunning, and they manage to escape, and so we find them in our hedgerows in Britain or in scrublands. They've naturalised themselves, and they're actually often found as the single kind of apple tree by the roadside. So keep your eye out, but you might already know where an apple grows near you, or you might be lucky enough to have one in your garden. And apples are a really great source of wildlife, and as you know, our wildlife in the UK is really endangered. And they're a food source for many birds like thrushes and bullfinch, and also you'll find birds nesting in them as well, like the blackbirds and everything. So they turn up again and again in our mythology. Apples, or the apple tree, and in fact pretty much every tradition seems to have a connection with the apple. So whether it will be the Celtic, the Greek, the European, the North American, or even the fairy tales of Europe, you'll find some reference to the apple goddesses, apple tree, apple magic. In Norse mythology, the apple was known as the fruit for eternal youth and also for fertility. And what I find really interesting is that modern research is now proving the medicinal worth of the apple. In the year 2000, there was a research study done in California at the university which showed that apples contain a powerful antioxidant like blueberries. So they slow down the aging process in body tissues, which is caused by oxidation. So perhaps apple could be the source of eternal youth after all. The apple is generally seen as a forbidden fruit throughout Greek mythology and also in the Christian tradition. It's known as the symbol of temptation, of knowledge and of sin. Though actually research shows that this forbidden fruit from the book of Genesis, in which Eve is said to have coaxed Adam with, hasn't been identified. It may have been just the Christian tradition that developed the story of it being the apple. Our ancestors relied on the apple to stay healthy, and every country, it seems to symbolise the apple with abundance and with the ability to cure many ills. So for me, the apple has always been the ultimate superfood, actually. And you all know the saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Apple is the fruit and the tree of love for the Greek goddess Aphrodite, and in European folklore is associated with love magic and the fairy folk, and often used in love charms. We can also see how the apple has crept into our modern day myth with the tale of Snow White, who was cursed and put to sleep by a poison apple. So back to Avalon a sec for all the Glastonbury fans. In the Celtic tradition, Avalon was also known as the Isle of Apples, as I've said before, and it was ruled by the fairy queen Morgan le Fay. And this is the land of fairies and the dead, and it was where King Arthur was taken to be healed. Like their cousins in the north, the Celts attributed the power of healing in youth or rebirth to apples. Apples are one of the magical trees, part of the Celtic Ogham tree alphabet, and the Ogham name is Quert. So in Druid folklore, apple, like the oak tree, is a holy tree, and it's because mistletoe, which is the sacred plant of the Druids, can grow on apple trees like it does on oak. Now in the Irish Druid tradition, the silver bough is cut from a magical apple tree, and this silver bough has silver apple-shaped bells which play a mystical tune. which could lull people into a trance state. And druids in this state can make contact with the other world, and it's from this magical trance which is induced by the silver bough and the silver bells. And there's a druidic tale which is called The Voyage of Bran, in which he is lulled into a stupor by an otherworldly woman, because she appears with an apple branch, and it is laden with these bells, these silver and gold bells, and he is entranced. And then he ventures off, entranced by the damsel with the magical branch, and he sets sail for enchanted shores and has his epic ventures and a big journey. So there's a big myth about that called the Tale of Bran. In the Wheel of the Year, in the Celtic Wheel of the Year, we'll find the apple tree in the west. And this is the time of the equinox, and it's also associated with the element of water. So with all of that said, it's really most important to feel into what the apple means for you. I often connect with the golden and silver apples in my shamanic journey. So this druidic and magical fairy connection is one which I nurture and like to cultivate with the apple tree. And I also find that the apple is protecting and nurturing, and it reminds me of the simplicity of life and that simplicity of what we need really to stay healthy and maintain our well-being. So the apple for you, you just need to think it might be all about vibrant health, youth and beauty. Or you might associate it with abundance, a sense of giving fruits openly from your heart, trusting that you will be replenished again with that energy of giving with an open heart and appreciating the abundance of what you already have in your life and able to help you open up to more. Or you might feel that the apple supports you with its medicine in a completely different way. And this vary depending on what's going on for you and what you're needing each time you wish to make a connection with the tree. And so let's just talk about how we use apples today. So we know that we eat some of them raw, some of them are cookers that we make, and we can only make pies with them or applesauce. Some of them are cider apples. And so we grow different varieties of apples for different reasons. And there's lovely apple wood as well. You might find beautiful objects used from the wood. There's also a remedy for grated apple, which is used as a remedy against diarrhea. And there's also a lovely tale of village wise women curing warts with the cut side of half an apple. So remember I was talking about that central star that you get? So cutting the apple so you can see the star, rubbing it over your warts, and then the tradition is to bury that apple in the garden. And as the apple rots away, the warts will disappear. Also, we use apple cider vinegar for helping promote healthy gut bacteria and improving our digestion. And in the Appalachian folk remedy, they use the inner bark of the tree or the root as a medicine in a tea to treat fevers and stomach pain. There's also a lovely tradition of wassailing the apple trees in Twelfth Night, which is more or less around January the 6th. And this was once a custom in many parts of Great Britain, particularly in the cider counties, which I've mentioned like Somerset, to ensure the health and the abundance of their crops. And it was customary to wassail the oldest apple tree in the orchard to ward off evil spirits. So this might involve singing, dancing, pouring libations, and beseeching the trees to produce a fine harvest of apples for the following spring. So use this inspiration to consider what medicine and blessings you can create with the apple. What does it bring to you? Maybe baking an apple pie feels right, or perhaps you might simply want to mindfully eat an apple to connect and honour this magical fruit. Most importantly, enjoy and have fun. Tune in to the journey and create your relationship with the apple tree in whatever way feels like the right thing for you to do.